What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today we need to talk about what may well be the dumbest Pokemon deck we have ever seen. And I do not say that lightly, incidentally. This was one dumb deck. It was all built around the base set Mewtwo. And when I say all built around the base set Mewtwo, I mean very literally all built around the base set Mewtwo. Pokemon, 4 Mewtwo. Trainers, 0. Energy, 56 psychic energy. That was it. That was the entire deck. 4 Mewtwo, 56 psychic energy. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a bit dumb and ridiculous. And how did that possibly work? Let me explain, shall we? So this was the Mewtwo from the base set. And it had the attack Psychic, 10 damage plus 10 more damage for each energy card attached to the defending Pokemon. It was fine, you get a bunch of energy on and then smash them and punish them for playing energy, and it wasn't why we played the deck. The reason we played the deck, the why, was Barrier. 2 Psychic Energy, discard 1 Psychic Energy attached to Mewtwo in order to use this attack. During your opponent's next turn, prevent all effects of attacks, including damage, done to Mewtwo. Oh. Now, I can illustrate how good this card is and how potentially broken this card is by comparing it to the reprint of Mewtwo that we got in Evolutions. Now remember that Evolutions was basically a reprint of the base set, not entirely. There were a whole bunch of differences, but one thing we saw in Evolutions was generally a reprint of the Mewtwo from Evolutions. Cool. Still had the same psychic attack, but now it was 20. Plus 20 for each energy attached to your opponent's active, rather than 10 plus 10. And it was for 2 colourless energy, meaning you could do it for a double colourless, which was nice. And Barrier was again 2 psychic energy. During your opponent's next turn, prevent all effective attacks, including damage done to this Pokemon. If one of your Pokemon used Barrier during your last turn, this attack can't be used. So it doesn't even say if this Pokemon used Barrier last turn. If any of your Pokemon used Barrier during your last turn. And that means you cannot Barrier twice in a row. And that really explains why base set Mewtwo was so gosh darned good. Because actually, you could Barrier constantly. You could literally Barrier every turn. You needed to discard 1 energy in order to Barrier. So that on your first turn, no, you're not using Barrier. You attach 1 energy, that's it, you've got 1 energy. But then turn 2, you attach a second energy and discard it to use Barrier. Now you're immune to any attacks. And then next turn you attach an energy and then Barrier. And then next turn you attach an energy and then Barrier. And then next turn you attach an energy and then Barrier. And then next turn you attach an energy and then Barrier. I could keep going, but I'm assuming you see where I'm going with this. If you use Barrier every single turn, you become completely immune to all attacks and cannot be hurt by anything turn after turn after turn. Your opponent can't hit you. Your opponent isn't able to hurt you. So you win. Now, the way you win is by deck out. Deck out is, at the start of your turn, you draw a card. If, however, you are unable to draw a card at the start of your turn, you lose. Now, there's a couple reasons why this deck can win by deck out. You're not discarding any cards from your opponent's deck here. What you're essentially doing is just making your opponent draw until they lose. And part of the reason is you are literally just playing energy cards. You start with 1 Mewtwo and then you attach an energy. And you just draw through your deck slower than your opponent. But the other thing is we have a mulligan rule in the Pokemon trading card game, whereby in order to begin the game, you have to have a basic Pokemon. If you don't have a basic Pokemon, Then you have to shuffle your hand into your deck, draw a new opening hand, and after each mulligan, a player can decide to draw 0, 1, or 2 cards. That is not the rule as it is at the moment, but at the time, you could draw up to 2 cards after each mulligan. Nowadays, it's 1 per mulligan after all the mulligans have happened. Back then, it was 2 per mulligan, and you did it after each mulligan. So if your opponent took a few extra cards for mulligans, they would get closer to decking out, though they didn't have to. You weren't really attacking. Maybe you'd get the odd KO with Psychic, but then you'd open yourself up to attack. What you were doing was just sitting here and blocking. Oh, it was fun. Now, there was kind of one counter to this. And the counter to this was essentially the energy removal cards. Energy removal and super energy removal. Energy removal was a card that let you remove an energy from one of your opponent's Pokemon, and super energy removal let you discard 1 energy attached to one of your Pokemon to discard 2 energy attached to one of your opponent's Pokemon. And it must also be noted that at the time there was Item Finder that let you discard 2 cards from your hand to put a trainer card from your discard pile back into your hand, i.e. allowing you to reuse energy removal, super energy removal, and item finder. So you could potentially play 4 energy removal, 4 super energy removal, and 4 item finder, and it would be fairly oppressive. And to be clear, back in the base set, we were playing a lot of energy removal cards. And that really was the counter to Mewtwo. Mewtwo wasn't playing any energy acceleration, which means you were just manually attaching every turn. And if you got a few turns head start, you'd be alright. But if you just barrier, discard 1 energy, and then your opponent drops an energy removal, you can't use barrier the next turn, which means your opponent can attack and KO you. And if you're not attacking and you've got Pokemon with 60 HP and you've probably only got like 1 Mewtwo out, as a side note, if you put more than 1 Mewtwo down, your opponent would be able to use Gust of Wind to pull that second Mewtwo off the bench into the active, because Barrier will only protect the Mewtwo that used Barrier. Which means that you basically couldn't have any bench Pokemon, because they'd be easy prizes for your opponent, because everyone was playing a lot of Gust of Wind. So you basically had to roll with 1 Mewtwo, and energy removal cards would hurt you. Now, if we fast forward a little bit further on, there are things that you can do. So for instance, when we got to the gym sets, we got no removal gym. A player must discard 2 cards from his or her hand in order to play an energy removal or super energy removal card. So this wouldn't stop your opponent playing those cards, but it would make it significantly more difficult for your opponent to play those cards. It wasn't perfect, but it was an answer. Of course, one of the biggest problems here is, even if you play 4 Mewtwo, 4 no removal gym, 52 psychic energy, well now all of a sudden, you're only trying to just draw it manually. And you've got, in a 60 card deck, if you're playing 4 copies of 1 card, drawing 7 at the beginning of the game, you've got around about a 50% chance of getting it turn 1, which isn't ideal. You could start playing around with stuff like computer search as well to try and increase your odds of drawing it, but at that point we're getting away from just the Mewtwo and all the energy into a rather different deck indeed. And then Neogenesis happened. And when Neogenesis happened, we got Cleffa. And when we got Cleffa, this deck just couldn't win. You see, the thing with Cleffa was that Cleffa let you shuffle your hand into your deck and draw 7 cards. So if your opponent was trying to deck you out, you just do nothing, do nothing, do nothing, do nothing, do nothing, and when you're just about to deck out, you eke and turn a hand of 40 cards into a hand of 7, and then you just go right back round again. And sure, your opponent can attack Cleffa, but firstly, they've got to flip a coin and flip heads to do so. And secondly, you can then attack Mewtwo, and that kind of ruins the entire point of their game plan. Cleffa kind of ruined things, unfortunately. Because you can just build up a giant hand, eke. Build up a giant hand, eke, etc. I don't think this was ever a particularly great deck. I don't see this in the annals of history, and I don't see this in all of these articles and all sorts, as this fantastic winning deck that dominated the format. Honestly, it seems to take a pretty hard loss to anything with lots of energy removal, and that's basically everything back in the base set. But it was a wonderful deck, it was a stupid deck, and it was so much fun. And if your opponent wasn't playing an answer, you basically couldn't lose. Now, I do need to give a shout out here to, I believe it was Pojo, who actually had their big book of Pokemon, and they did list this deck in there. And also to both Jaywitz and Puka, who over on Twitter the other day reminded me that this deck existed. And when they reminded me that this deck existed, I remembered I'd never done a video on it, and I felt a little bit guilty, so I got right on it. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. A weird deck, a fun deck, and definitely one of the dumbest decks ever. So to those people out there that think they may have invented the going to a pre-release, pulling an EX or a GX or a Pokemon V, and playing one big Pokemon with 39 energy, you can only play 40 cards in a pre-release. Not only did you not invent it, we have literally been doing this since the game started. So go nuts in the comment section, ladies and gentlemen. Tell me what you think about this, but please do be nice. Do you have any memories of this? I'd love to know. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at @TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And please do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassyPlays, where you can find out about a whole bunch of games that don't have Pokemon in, but are still pretty gosh darned awesome. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.